Hey everyone, I am Tira with Rent Mason Bees, and today I wanted to teach you what a solitary bee is. We're here at the Flower and Garden Show, and one of the #1 questions we get asked is, rent a bee? What does that mean? Well, you're not necessarily renting bees, you're releasing the bees and renting the nesting material. Do you guys want to learn what a solitary bee is?
Sure.
Okay, so a solitary bee is all the females lay all her own eggs, finds her own nest, and gathers her own food for those babies. Solitary, alone. She does all the work by herself. We have the blue orchard mason bee, which is the native pollinator. That's a really important thing to know, that these blue orchard bees are native. And what they do is they fly in cooler and wet weather because they're the native bees. And they have tiny little hairs on their belly called scopa. And they belly flop onto those flowers, and it collects pollen all over their bodies. So they pollinate 95% of everything they land on. That enables them to enrich everything in your habitat, in your ecosystem. It's going to grow bigger and stronger. And then that little bee is going to go in your yard and collect mud for its nest. And it's going to go into these little holes with that mud. It's going to crawl in the back of these holes, and it's going to plug it with mud. And then it will, I don't have a picture of our little bees. It'll plug it with mud, and then it'll lay a pollen loaf, and then it will have cap it with mud. So it'll be a mud, pollen, baby, mud, mud, pollen, baby, mud. And then that little tiny egg will grow into a larvae and eat all the pollen. It'll grow into a chubby bee, and then it will spin a silk cocoon. So these are baby bees.
They're harmless.
They are harmless. These little bees don't sting. They're native to our habitat. They're very important for our pollinators. And these little bees will emerge from the cocoon when temperatures reach 55 degrees.
55.
Yep. They will pollinate, they'll enrich everything in your habitat, and then they will repeat the process. These female bees lay about 15 babies in their lifetime. The honeybee queens lay about 2,000 a day. So they're not only going to pollinate and enrich your habitat, you're going to help their solitary bee population by releasing them out in the outside. So you can get a nesting block, a tube of about 50 to 60 cocoons, and a bag of clay and a pack of flower seeds. And you're going to take this tube and you're going to put it out in early spring. You'll take the tape off, you'll stick it in and then they'll crawl through the hole and emerge.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. This is my son Jackson, who has raised bees with me for, since you were 5. His job as a little boy was to water the mud hole and stir it with a stick. So he's learned all about bees. Do you want to tell everybody what a solitary mason bee is?
So a solitary mason bee is basically a bee, but better. A bee that pollinates your stuff 95% of the time if it lands on it. And you don't have to do the work. I don't know.
He's right. These little bees will pollinate 95% of everything they land on. They have little hairs on their belly called scopa, and they belly flop onto those flowers. Honeybees collect it in their hind legs, so they only pollinate 5% of everything they land on. So these little bees are remarkable pollinators. They're native species to our planet, and we need to help our little bee population.
And also, another thing that I really like about them is they don't sting, and they're really interesting to watch from the bee block, because they just fly around, and then they lay their eggs in there. There's 5 to 7 mason bee eggs in each one. And they're just super fun to watch and fly around, and they're really nice, and I really like them because they don't sting, so yeah.